Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
In the TimePage timeline, which is the list of days, there's a little plus button on the bottom right corner. You can tap it and it will create a new event, but by default, it creates the event today. But you can actually take that plus button and hold it and drag it. And you can drag it onto any day in the timeline. And then when you let go, it'll start creating an event for that particular day.
Welcome to another episode of iPad Pros. Joining me today is Adam Shaw, who is one of the developers on the team that creates the awesome Moleskine Studio of apps. These include TimePage, Actions, and Flow. He also creates GlanceBar if you have an Apple Vision Pro, which is a great utility app for visionOS. In today's episode, we dive into his thoughts and usage of the iPad itself and dive deep into all of Moleskine Studio's apps. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. By supporting the show financially, you'll get early access to both iPad Pros and Vision Pros. My thanks to everyone that supports the show. With that, here's my interview with Adam. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Oh, thank you.
I'm excited to have this chat. I've run across your apps before, and I finally took the time to take a real deep dive into what you've created, and they're pretty remarkable apps, as we'll talk about. And I also know you from the Apple Vision Pro world, from GlanceBar, which is one of my favorite utilities on that platform.
Right. Oh, thanks.
So before we dive into the apps themselves, can you share a bit on your background and also what your current iPad setup is these days?
Sure. So I'm a software developer by trade. I've been a software developer for over 25 years now, way before there was an iPhone. But when the iPhone came out, I started developing apps for it. I just thought this is a great platform, a good opportunity to kind of, instead of working for big companies, maybe try some things of my own. And so I started off releasing my own apps for my own company. I had an early app called NoteMaster, one of the early note-taking apps, and I quit my day job and did that for a while, and that worked out for a few years. And then, the App Store market's hard, and so it became not as feasible to do, and I did a lot of contract work, and then I finally joined the team where I'm at now for my day job, which is a company called Bonobo Labs, and we are the company that makes the Moleskine Studio suite of apps. And I still do my own apps on the side as hobby projects with my company Kabuki Vision. That's GlanceBar, which you mentioned for Vision Pro. That's kind of my own personal project. And but since the iPhone came out, I've just been doing native iPhone apps, iPad apps, Apple TV apps, Vision Pro apps, all the Apple stuff.
That's awesome. And how big's the team that's working on, TimePage, Actions, and Flow with you?
That's about 12 people total.
Okay, cool. And your role within that team, I imagine different people have different specialties within the team, right?
Yeah, definitely. We are a very flat organization as hierarchy-wise.
Yeah.
There's no one is anyone else's boss, which is interesting. But as you indicated, yes, we all do have various specialties. We have about 3 or 4 people whose main focus is iOS, app development programming. We have a couple people who are more dedicated designers, although they do programming too, and the programmers do a little bit of design. We have a couple people who specialize more on web, and then we have a couple people that are handling a lot of our frontline customer support.
Gotcha. And within that, where do you fall?
I'm one of the main iOS developers.
Okay.
I work on the programming stuff, almost exclusively.
Gotcha. Very cool. And what's your current iPad setup these days?
My main iPad now, I had to write it down because I had to look up, I lost track of them all. I knew it was an M1. It's the iPad Pro 11-inch M1 3rd gen, which was released in 2021.
Nice.
And I pretty much have that and an Apple Pencil, which I don't use all the time. I use it more for when I'm using an app that the pencil makes sense for.
Yep.
But that's kind of it. I don't really use a keyboard or trackpad or anything like that. It's kind of just my handheld tablet device.
Yeah, I got the M4 iPad Pro 11-inch, and I didn't get the keyboard with it because I've got this headless MacBook Air that I'm using with it as the keyboard and trackpad thing. But I've been using it a lot more with just the Smart Folio and the Apple Pencil. It's very nice. It's just a little tablet again. I've had the big one for so long that it's nice to have a smaller iPad again.
Yeah. Now remind me again, because Apple has too many folios and things with the word smart in it. The Smart Folio is the one that
it should be called
over?
the dumb folio. It
Okay.
should be the dumb folio. It's just fabric with
it's
you
the
know,
case.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I have that too. Okay, I wouldn't have known what to call it. I've given up sometimes there are certain areas that I've kind of given up or atrophied my brain ability to keep track of the names of everything. I used to be very good about it.
Yeah, I think smart comes to the fact that there's magnets in it, because the Smart's cover was for the iPad 2 is the thing, and the only smartness about it was the magnets would tell the iPad when to wake up and all that stuff, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I'll try to remember that. Smart doesn't mean keyboard. Smart means just that it has something that triggers something.
Sure.
It's more than just a piece of physical fabric.
Right, that's my logic at least. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah. So in your day-to-day life, the iPad kind of serves as its role as a tablet. And as you're developing, you're obviously using the apps to kind of see how that's working and whatnot. But what kind of tablet-y roles is the iPad serving in your life?
Yeah, so, I mean, when I'm at my desk doing my work, I work from home mostly, then in that case, the iPad is mainly, I'm testing our apps on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hooked up to Xcode. I'm building and running, making sure that, everything feels good on it. But in my sort of regular other life, the tablet, it is kind of a leisure consumption device, I guess. I hate using that term because I think people say it as a negative, like, oh, it's just a consumption device. But that's what I like it for. I'd go so far and say that I use it at home all the time. I probably use it for things that a lot of people would just use their iPhone for, right? Mm-hmm. They just, I'm going to take it out of my pocket and browse Mastodon or, whatever, check my email. I feel like my iPad is just, it's that, but it's better, it's bigger, and it's easy for me to carry between my living room coffee table where it spends most of its time, and then if I'm going to bed, I take it with me, and so I can read some ebooks before I fall asleep. Yeah, that kind of thing. I still do use my iPhone at home a little bit, but I think most of the things that people might use their iPhone for at home, I use my iPad for, or I prefer it. I try to. I won't necessarily, walk 3 rooms across my house just to get it if I want to look something up real quick, but it's definitely my preferred device for just leisurely, casual consumption, like checking email, watching YouTube videos, social media check-ins, that kind of thing. Usually things, maybe a little bit of something that requires a little bit of light interaction, like replying to someone on Mastodon, which is a short little response, I'll do that. But if I need to do something more involved, I still kind of head back to my Mac. And I think that's because I have to use my Mac for work because of Xcode. And therefore all my other, I guess, say more advanced worky use cases are already set up on my Mac. And it just, that's just, maybe it's habit more than anything else. But that's kind of what I prefer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as a developer, can't really do most of that work on the iPad quite yet.
Not yet. Maybe one day. I'm open to it. I would definitely, give it a try if there was something. Yeah.
So in your current use of it, any frustrations about the kind of platform overall, or are you generally happy with like the kind of tasks you've kind of given it?
I am quite happy with it probably because of my more casual use of it. I know there's a lot of dissatisfaction with some of the, multitasking features and pro level use cases, which I think just don't affect me the way they might affect other people. When I do multitasking, I have never really adopted Stage Manager. It never really stuck with me. I like just, the split view works great for me. I think I like the whole screen taken up by apps. In Stage Manager, even if you make the windows as big as they can be, it still feels like there's a margin of home screen peeking around the edges, which somehow on the Mac, that's fine with me.
Right.
But on the iPad, I'm just used to like, no, everything has to be edge to edge.
Well, it's on the Mac. It's weird. The desktop just got more useful those widgets. So like I can have the desktop peeking, and now I got the weather behind me and like the temperature of my bedroom or whatever. And it's kind of nice having like the desktop peek behind on the Mac these days.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Stage Manager is great. Stage Manager is great when I need to do things with like 4 apps or 3 apps. But most of the time, I do prefer just kind of the fluid nature of split screen and dragging one app into the split screen and swapping it out with another. And it's kind of a fun way to interact, especially with touch, of just kind of this fluid nature of just using split screen and slide over in that way.
Now, it's been a while since I tried Stage Manager. Is it still the case that you pretty much have to use Stage Manager mode or split screen mode? Like
yes.
you can't mix and match, or you can't easily switch between them, right?
You have to go to the control center and toggle it on and off.
Okay, at least
which I'll do depending on what I'm doing at the moment. But and then you can have split screen up on the iPad if you're connected to an external monitor. The external monitor will have Stage Manager while you can continue to use split screen stuff on the iPad screen if you want to.
Okay, that's pretty nifty. Yeah. I guess I'd forgotten about Control Center. I was imagining having to go to the Settings app and dig through different levels of things to switch. So so that's not so bad. Yeah.
Any other just general thoughts about the iPad before you dive into the apps?
Nothing in particular. I mean, I feel like I've been watching from the sidelines the various discussions about pro uses of iPad, and I feel a little left out because I don't really haven't really adopted that, I guess. And I'm not sure if I haven't adopted it because I don't want that, or I haven't adopted it because it's not good enough for me yet. So I guess I'm not really making a point other than to say I don't know. I have sympathy for people that find some of its pro features lacking, or have frustrations, or their wish list is seemingly never fulfilled by Apple. But at the same time, I'm a little scared because it's actually like exactly what I want. It's kind of, I think what Apple originally pitched for it back in 2010, that was exactly what I embraced and have not let go of. So, I don't know. I'm open to wherever it goes, but I'm just a little unsure about that.
For me, at least, the frustration was like John Gruber has the executives on stage at the talk show WWDC, and he's not really an iPad guy, and so he frames it from a Mac perspective. Like, why don't you just enable the stuff that you can do on the Mac? The real question to ask the Apple execs is, why can't you figure out an iPad-y way to enable these pro features? Like when you brought the trackpad to the iPad, you did it not by bringing the mouse to the iPad, but by bringing this thought-out, transformative, it's this cursor that kind of transforms what you're doing in a very iPad way. Why can't you bring like more thought-out audio system to the iPad in an iPad kind of way versus what the Mac does? Like bring pro features to the iPad in kind of unique ways that aren't just clones of what the Mac's doing,
I like that because I think that there's other people I've heard from out there who maybe are pushing more for why don't you just turn it into the Mac? Why don't you just let it run macOS? Which my own personal opinion is part of, you can't separate the OS from the device. I feel like an iPad running macOS isn't an iPad or a Mac. It's this weird in between thing. I'm not saying Apple would never do that. I'm not saying that it's couldn't have some value, but I like what you just said. That's, Apple has a bunch of smart people, and you think that they invent new paradigms for things all the time, and they could, figure this out if it was high enough priority, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully we'll get some of those things over the years. We have. It's just takes a while sometimes.
Yeah. And there's years where nothing moves, right? There's years where things get better and we're all excited, and then there's years where, like, did they forget about the iPad? I guess,
So let's dive into the apps from Moleskine Studio. I have to first say I really love the approach of making this kind of a studio of apps, a bundle you can just buy from the App Store as a free bundle, and then you can subscribe as a studio of apps versus the one-offs, which they do function individually very well, but as we'll talk about, they interlink in really clever, cool ways. Where did this kind of approach come from? Like, was there an original app? Was like Flow the first app, and then you kind of slowly added apps to the lineup over time, or kind of speak about the origins of this?
Yeah, sure. So it definitely did not start off. We did not set out to create a bundle of apps. This started even it was before I joined the team. TimePage was the first app, and the team just wanted to make a really cool calendar app. Our relationship, so for those people, I'll say this, you probably know this, but maybe all the listeners don't. Moleskine is a separate company that is a well-known brand of high-end paper notebooks. That is
okay. Yeah, because I've heard that name before, and that the apps is like, are they related in any way? Yeah.
Yeah. So that is that is their main focus. They are not a digital company, really. They are old school, high-end paper notebooks that are if you know any artists or designers, they've probably heard of Moleskine. It kind of caters to that sort of high-end sensibility crowd, kind of like the Apple of notebooks. They're very good products, but also the brand is also a big part of the allure. And so we, the team I'm at now, I was not at the company at the time, decided they wanted to make a calendar app, and they were thinking about maybe just we were going to release it ourselves. But instead of doing that, or before we did that, we approached Moleskine with kind of this pitch of a partnership, that why don't we make our apps which have similar kind of elevated design sensibilities to what they have in their paper products, and we can brand them as Moleskine branded apps. We'll design and develop the apps and handle everything, even like customer support. And Moleskine, they provide the brand and some of the marketing, and it's kind of a real partnership. So we started that with TimePage, and that was very successful. And so then we thought, maybe we should expand this partnership and not just be a one-off app. Maybe it should really kind of be a series of apps. And so that's when the idea of the Moleskine Studio suite of apps was born. And at the time, we didn't have a real, concrete plan as to what all the apps should be. But the first one that popped into everyone's head was Actions, which is a to-do list app, because we think, calendar events, scheduled tasks, they're kind of related. We could see how that they'd be a good complement to one another. And then later we added Flow as a drawing app. And initially there was no paid bundle. They were all still set. They integrated technically, but purchase-wise, they were separate apps. And then we decided to make them a bundle, which actually was a real technical challenge, because Apple does not provide a mechanism for developers to have a subscription bundle. You have to kind of hard code it yourself and make sure that people don't subscribe to the bundle 3 times in all 3 apps. So we did that maybe a year after Flow came out. And I think that's probably the way most people subscribe to the apps, is through the bundle.
Okay. Yeah. And so the 3 apps are TimePage, which, like the best way to describe it is it's a calendar app, just really beautifully designed and thought out in that way. And Actions being a task manager, and then Flow all about drawing. And in my mind, it kind of replaces the Notes app sketching features of the Apple Pencil, just, kind of a pro version of that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think the very first version of Flow, we kind of wanted it to be all those things. It was like unlock your creativity, sketching, drawing. It's for artists, but it's also for people that just want to fiddle around with sketching stuff. It has very realistic drawing tools. That was one of the main things. And certainly note-taking was part of that. Although we don't have a lot of, I guess you'd call, advanced note-taking features. It's like we have lots of customers that do use it to jot down notes, but it's not specifically designed for that. It's kind of like anything you want to draw or write with your Apple Pencil is kind of the goal there, I guess.
Okay. Cool. So I just want to mention before we dive into the various apps that normally I go one app at a time, but in this case, I think jumping around will be the best way to handle this. So we'll kind of be jumping around and then kind of focus on flow at the end a bit.
Okay.
So so first off, I just want to ask about kind of custom gestures and maybe little Easter eggs included in the apps. For instance, I noticed in Actions, you can do the hold the refresh motion you might know from Tweety back in the day when looking at your schedule, and that will let you create a new reminder for today. Are there any other kind of little things like that kind of in within the apps?
Yeah. There's a lot of them. And actually, before I joined you here today, I did a quick refresher of the apps because some of these things were added years ago, and I couldn't remember all of the things. The little pull to add, we call it, actually originated in TimePage. On the TimePage day screen, you can pull to add a new event, and we just kind of adopted that for Actions. So things like that, but they're throughout the app. Another one is in the TimePage timeline, which is the list of days. There's a little plus button on the bottom right corner. You can tap it and it will create a new event, but by default, it creates the event today. But you can actually take that plus button and hold it and drag it, and you can drag it onto any day in the timeline. And then when you let go, it'll start creating an event for that particular day. So little things like that we don't intend them to be Easter eggs. Well, it's not wrong to call them Easter eggs in the sense that these are not the primary interactions to do these things, and we don't.
But they're functional.
They're functional, and it's not like we have a big tutorial where we show people, hey, you should drag the plus button, but they are things that people do figure out, and they are useful, right? Like it's a little bit of a shortcut. Pulling down to add a new action or a new task in Actions it's quicker, and it also kind of solves the problem. Developers talk about, should you put your toolbar buttons at the bottom of the screen or at the top? They all used to be at the top, but now we got big phones and people are saying, they should be at the bottom. And doing pull to add kind of solves that problem wherever you put it, right? It makes where the location of where the button is less important, because if people want to figure out the fastest way is to just quickly, pull down and it'll add something.
Yeah. One of the delightful things I discovered the other night was in Flow, you can drag the color around, and it feels like when you do that, all the colors are kind of like roped together where, gravity's, making them slosh against each other. Then you can land it at the bottom or, the top, and they'll then at that point it'll lay out properly. But just a delightful way to move something around the screen,
Yeah. We have, our team has two designers that are like two of the absolute best designers I've ever worked with. And a lot of these very fun components come from them. One of them, Nate, has what he calls the fiddle factor, which is the idea that there's usefulness in all these interactions, but you want some of them to be so cool that people just want to tap them and move it around and do it just to experience like the app doing that thing, that it's fun to fiddle around with beyond its actual functionality. And that's something that we try to, think of ideas for throughout all the apps.
When was TimePage released? How long ago was it?
It was before my time at the company. I started working with them in 2016, so maybe a couple years before that. I'd guess 2014. Sorry, team, if you're listening to this, that I don't know the actual date of TimePage, but
the reason I'm asking, I'm curious. The code base, like with Swift UI, is somewhat new. I don't know. Has the code been able to how Swifty is the code, or how much are you reliant on old kind of technologies to do all this kind of beautiful design work?
Yeah, so the original app was absolutely all Objective-C, all UI-Kit. It was before Swift even existed, before Swift UI existed. As time has gone on, we write new stuff in Swift. We have done a few new screens in TimePage in the last year, which is Swift UI. So we now have a mix of both. And a few years back, we created a version of TimePage for the Mac, which actually is an entirely new app that's all Swift UI. Because we thought, well, when we go to the Mac, do we want to learn AppKit? In either way, we can't use our existing UI code. So we either need to use AppKit or maybe we should do Swift UI. In some cases, I think there's one concept that we added to TimePage on the Mac that didn't exist in the iOS version, and then we brought it to the iOS version using the same Swift UI code. So it's kind of a big combination of all these things. We are very pragmatic when it comes to maintaining the code base. We clean things up when we feel like they get messy, when we feel like it's hard to maintain, but we don't rewrite things just for the sake of rewriting things. We're all very comfortable in Objective-C. We're all very comfortable in UIKit. So switching back and forth, sometimes it scrambles our brains a little bit, but we're all fine kind of working in all three modes and not it being in too much of a rush to just rewrite for the sake of rewriting.
Right. Nice. Yeah. And then the onboarding process I found just very nice. Kind of little tips kind of scattered throughout the app. You can opt in for like an email campaign as well to help you get acquainted with everything. What was kind of the process of making the onboarding not overly tippy where it's like, oh, another tip, I don't want this, kind of getting that balance right and kind of addressing, I'm sure you guys get email questions from new users and kind of addressing the things that are most commonly asked from you guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's changed a number of times over the years. We're now using Apple's own tip kit, which is their system for presenting these little tips in kind of a standard way. And it's also, tip kit is not just good for presenting it in a standard way, but also it's very good at assigning certain types of logic, like only show this tip if the user's done this other thing first, but only show one tip per day. Don't show more than that. So you get a lot of control over of striking that balance of not annoying the users with too many tips. But because our apps are very gesture based, and some of them even you start TimePage, you're on what we call the timeline, which is this scrolling list of days, and it's not immediately obvious how you get anywhere else. And the answer is you kind of swipe left or right to go to various other screens. We do add little handle controls to kind of give you a hint, but things like that, we felt like, okay, we need to have some explicit tips there. Even before we were using Apple's tip kit, we had our own little system of little pop-ups like that. And the email campaigns that you talked about, that kind of serves two purposes. It does help people learn new things about the app all the time. It also does let us surface some of the things that maybe are more like Easter eggy, right? Little fun things, and people like that. I mean, if you show, hey, did you know about this little gesture does this? People want to go try that out. That keeps them active and interested in the app, especially in the early days. You don't want people to subscribe and feel like, oh, it's not that exciting, or I don't know how it works. So getting kind of these emails, they get less in your way. It's not like something that's popping up on your phone or in the app. You can read them, you can unsubscribe, you can do whatever. We didn't always do that. I think our team in general is very cautious about anything that seems spammy or like sketchy or privacy invasive. We're really always trying to avoid those things. And I think sometimes, we had in our heads like, oh, asking for an email address to send tips, that's one of those tricks that companies do to try to market to you. And we had to kind of get over that, because there are people that really, really wants good information to see how to use the apps, not just how to use certain functionality, but it can just be aspirational, right? Showing like, hey, look at what some artists have drawn in Flow, make people think like, oh, I should give Flow another chance. I should try to learn how to, I don't know, be a better illustrator or whatever it is. And so that has helped a lot. People seem to really like it.
Yeah. I need to relook up the pricing, but I'm curious if you know offhand, getting the bundle of all three for the year is, if you're a user of, say 2 apps, but not all 3, is it more expensive to do the 2 apps versus the bundle? I understand if you're just a 1 app person, then that of course would be the cheaper option. But if you're 2 and maybe you dabble in a third, how's that go?
I can't remember specifically. I know that when we first did the bundle, it was a little bit cheaper, even if you only wanted 2 apps. So if you just cared about TimePage and Actions, and a lot of times that is what I'd say, if people are going to use 2 apps out of 3, it's TimePage and Actions, because Flow's productivity, but it's a little more of a fun thing for a lot of people. And it was definitely, you could save a couple bucks by doing the bundle, even if you only wanted 2 apps. I believe that is still the case, but no one get mad at me if I'm wrong, because we have changed the pricing a little bit a couple times, but that was always the intention, was to have it so that, because it makes sense.
Yeah. And it also, gives people the inspiration to, let me try using Flow more. It's part of the bundle. Let me give it a shot more.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think when you have 3 apps, someone has downloaded one of your apps, and that's the one they mainly want to use. Maybe they don't know about the other 2.
Yeah.
And it's reasonable that you could probably get them excited about at least one of the other 2. And I think, we like the bundle not just because it's, you're giving us more money. It's really not that. It is, when people have the bundle, it lets us spend more time and energy on making the apps integrate well together, and kind of assume that if you have one, you probably have the other ones. And it's a little more, I don't know. It just lets us take that integration farther the more people that have the bundle. And we always think even if someone's mainly using TimePage and they're using Actions a little bit, but we can add more things that integrate them together, maybe they'll be more, they'll find that more useful. They can use Actions more than they thought they could.
Definitely. So another just throughout this discussion, I'm just going to share a lot of just the stuff I just loved discovering.
I love hearing it.
Yeah, scrolling through the calendar, it felt like an old iPod where, you're 3 months in the future or 3 weeks in the past. Do you know, is that where the inspiration kind of came from? The old iPod kind of thing where you're at the S part of the alphabet, there's a little S that pops up.
I wish I had an answer for you. I should have, talked to one of our designers. That was done before my time at the company, and that feature's kind of been there for as long as I can remember. Yeah. And it always just seemed very natural to me, and it's never come up that came from the iPod, but I would not be surprised, because everyone on the team are big, longtime Apple fans and collectors of all the devices. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of came from that. That was part of the inspiration.
Right. Another thing similar to that is, as you're in Flow changing the color, say you're changing the darkness, dynamically it'll change the name of the color. So change from burgundy to blood red or whatever. And I just love how just every little color is just accounted for in there. I don't know, is there a database of colors to feed into that, or where does that all come from?
Yeah, there was that. So that's actually a feature. I was the implementer of that, so I can talk a bit about that. First of all, I think the idea is cool, right? I mean, having names for your colors adds no actual functionality. It doesn't, but it's just a cool
It's a lot
thing.
more fun than this is 27E05 or whatever.
Exactly. And it's just fun to see what all the names are. So, yes, there was a list of hundreds of colors. I think I was on Wikipedia. And what the app is doing is, instead of kind of starting from that list and those are the colors you have, it lets you kind of pick any color you want by changing the hue and the saturation or brightness. And then it looks up in a database the current color you have selected, which named color is it closest to in color space, and then shows you that name. So you probably noticed, you can tweak the brightness a little bit and it won't change names, but then you go past the threshold and it's like, oh, now instead of being orange, you're, I don't know, dark orange or whatever it is. So and I think we started with a list, and then I believe that some of the designers had some fun with just curating that list a little bit and removing some names that didn't make sense, and also just adding some new made up colors.
Yeah, were any names created by anyone in the team that they just had a name they wanted to name a color to put in there?
I can't. I'm sure the designers on our team did a little bit of that. Yeah. I know during development, as I was implementing this, I pitched that, like, hey, we should all just come up with our color and name it after ourselves. You got to have Adam Green,
right,
or whatever. But then we were trying to get an app out the door. And sometimes ideas like that, even when everyone agrees, like, that's great. Unless anyone actually makes that happen, it didn't happen. So I said, we even thought about doing something like a contest or something with customers. Like, they got to pick their own color and name it or something like that. Well, maybe we should still do that. That'd be kind of a cool way of letting people, have more personalization, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. Another delightful thing in TimePage is as you're swiping between the days, it gives you this feeling that you're like rotating this little cube with this depth to it. Any other like animations like that you just want to do it just because it's fun, gives you a little smile doing it?
Yeah, there's a few things. So in Actions, if you have a list, any of the lists where you have lists of tasks, when you scroll, I guess, up so that things at the bottom go on and off the bottom of the screen, the actions are presented as these little cards. We call them action cards, and they kind of fold under the list instead of just scrolling off the bottom edge of the screen. So things like that. Yeah, our designers, they're awesome. They love those kind of things. Some of them are practical, actually. Like the actions thing is, if you don't have the cards fold away, then what do you do with the buttons that are at the toolbar below the list, right? You have to have the list now go behind them, and you can do that by having kind of an opaque toolbar. There's a whole lot of design theory there, but part of it is like we don't want things to kind of just necessarily fade away under other things. We want it to have some, I'm not saying it's physically accurate, like in the terms of real world physics, but it kind of physically makes sense in kind of a little bit of a
like as you're swiping left to right, you have a real sense of place of where you are in this app. Like if your iPad was a 30-inch iPad, you could see, you wouldn't need to swipe, just be this big long thing you're swiping between. And yeah.
And the other part of that, back to the TimePage example you gave, is a lot of our transitions, you're swiping from day to day and it's doing this little transition, but they're all interactive transitions, right? It's not just you swipe and then it quickly animates. It moves along with your finger. And that's something we do a lot of. When it's actually way easier development wise just to say, oh, did you swipe? Okay, now do a little half-second animation. But to actually do it so it follows your finger as you move, again, that's something that people want to play around with as they're, when they're really using the app, they're just going to do quick swipes, but you can kind of move your finger and watch it move in 3D space and kind of go like, oh, that looks neat, and spend some time there.
With TimePage and Actions, are those designed to be full replacements for calendar and reminders, or are there some things from those apps that haven't made it into those apps? And the other thing I'm curious about is data that you add into, say, Actions, if it pulls in your reminders lists, is it feeding data back into reminders in that same way?
Okay, multi-part question.
Sorry.
And the answer is different for each of the apps. That's why it's a little tricky. So TimePage, which again was the first app we developed, it is integrating with EventKit, which is the name of Apple's APIs for accessing system calendars and reminders. I think TimePage came out even before reminders existed. So at the time, EventKit, we thought of it as just calendar integration. And there's an advantage to that because people hopefully already have their calendars set up on their iOS device.
Yes.
And they install TimePage, and then there's no setup. It's just, we already have access to all of your calendar data. There's a little permission prompt. You have to give it permission. But
it's one of the things I love about Apple platforms is how they did the calendar back like a decade, more 2 or 3 decades ago, where it's like, oh, any app can just feed into this, and it lets you be more carefree with like, let me jump here and see what this app's doing with the calendar and see if I like it.
It's really nice. Yeah, because you can.
There's no risk.
There's no risk. You can jump between 4 different calendar apps. You can use them all simultaneously, and they all work together. That also had the advantage of, TimePage originally was an iOS app only. We didn't have a Mac version, but of course on the Mac you can still use Apple's calendar, and it's still everything syncs through iCloud or through, if you have like a Google Calendar, it syncs through Google. So that's definitely an advantage. Some of the disadvantages are there are limitations in EventKit. EventKit does not literally expose everything. For example, I don't know if it's on the iOS version, but the Mac version of Calendar, you can have attachments to events, and that is not exposed to third-party developers. So we're using EventKit. TimePage cannot show nor add attachments, and there's kind of nothing. You're kind of stuck at that point. You're stuck with what you get. Actions. We took the exact opposite approach. Actions, it was not intended to integrate with reminders in the same way. It was intended, we have our own backend service where all your data is stored. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, when you first, as part of the onboarding for Actions, we will offer to say, hey, do you want us to import all of your reminders into the app? It's kind of a one-way import. And it's not just on onboarding. You can go back and do it again later if you have more data. Yeah. But the intention is that if you want to switch to Actions, you're probably not going to be using reminders, unless you're using them, of course, for totally separate domains of tasks, right? Like,
yeah, the one thing I could think of is where a two-way sync would be nice. I know it's probably you wouldn't do this because of the probably not having as much data that you can actually put into it with whatever you're able to with reminders. Was, say you have a family member that just wants to use the reminders app and it's a shared list, and you prefer to live in Actions, but that whole
absolutely. And that's one of the challenges. Actions, I think we do cover almost all of the features of reminders. There might be 1 or 2 less common ones that we don't. In Actions, we do have a web version, and we have an Android version of Actions. And so having our own task data, our own servers for that allowed us to do kind of a cross-platform app. Interestingly, EventKit, which is the same API used for calendars, that's also what developers use for reminders integration. I'd say it even is more limited when it comes to reminders. Like you have no control over what I want to say for sharing. Obviously, if you have sharing set up in reminders, then you'll see those things in Actions, but you wouldn't be able to like set up sharing in Actions. You wouldn't be able to like invite someone new to a list in Actions. And same with things like subtasks. Subtasks come through in EventKit, but they're not hierarchical. They're just part of the flat list of all the tasks. And so we talk about it a lot, whether in each case the pros and cons, and like if we had to do it all over, what would we do? And it's a tough call, because I think if we had designed Actions to just be a front end to reminders, we definitely would be much more severely limited in what we could provide. And so I think we made the right choice, although, you never know. We do get a lot of feedback on that. There's definitely people that just want it to be a front end to reminders. So
yeah, makes total sense. And there is a collaboration with other Actions users. So if you
yes. So that's and that does require those other Actions users to have Actions. Although all our apps work. I should mention this. All our apps, although they're subscription based, they all, if you don't have a subscription or you have an expired subscription, all the data is still available read-only mode. So if you wanted to just simply share Actions with someone kind of as a read-only thing, they could have a copy of Actions for free and not have to subscribe. And of course, if they're part of your family, we support Apple Family Sharing. So that kind of works well for that also.
Nice. Yeah. So before we dive into Flow, and there's a lot more before Flow, but Apple Pencil is what I'm curious about for TimePage and Actions. Obviously, Flow is heavily integrated with the Pencil. I'm curious, TimePage or Actions, anything unique about Apple Pencil with those apps?
Nothing specific. We support the, what's it called, Scribble, where you any normal standard text field you can write in, and all of our text fields are standard iOS text fields, so it supports that. But there's nothing, no Pencil Kit specific code.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And then we talked about the apps being interconnected. In what ways do they, work with each other?
Most of the integration is between TimePage and Actions. We kind of treat it like TimePage is the primary place that you would create and manage your calendar events, but you will see your scheduled Actions tasks in your calendar. And Actions is the primary place you would add and manage your Actions tasks, but your action task will still show up on. Wait, it goes both directions. I think I repeated the same direction both times. You'll see your action tasks in TimePage, and you'll see your TimePage events in Actions on the appropriate days. Flow, the integration is a little bit more limited. For that, you can create a document in Flow that is linked, we should say, to a particular calendar day. And then if you open that day in TimePage, it'll show a little thumbnail image of the Flow document, which you can tap on and it'll launch Flow. It's just it's not as deep of integration with Flow.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then TimePage, I got a laugh out of when I pulled up the event details page, telling me how long it would take me to get there in helicopter, which I just loved. I love that because it'll rotate through, driving, walking, biking, and then the helicopter showed up. It's like, was the humor just too good to pass that one up? Have you heard from any, millionaires that actually have a helicopter that are glad that was in there?
I don't think we've heard from anyone that had a helicopter. We also have airship, like Blimp, which
yeah.
I don't think anyone owns an airship. Not 100% sure. I think that might have been added before I joined the team, but I know that they did look up the speeds of those things and actually have it make sense. There's another item which was added. It's not really a humorous thing, but we had, I can't remember if a user contacted us on Twitter or wrote to us, and it was about something else, I think, but they mentioned that they use a wheelchair. And that kind of inspired us, like, wait a minute, why for walking directions, why don't we have a wheelchair as one of our mechanisms for getting around? And so we added a wheelchair icon for
cool.
that, so you can kind of choose. And even within walking and driving, you can choose what car you want. Like there's like 8 different car icons, everything from a Porsche to, I don't know anything about cars, I shouldn't even be talking about it. There's a variety of cars that if you care about cars, you'll recognize. But yeah, just fun things like that. Like, why not? Those things are pretty easy to throw in. And the way our team works, we focus mostly on, making our apps functional and providing real functional value and things. But we also allow ourselves to have fun like that, to do things that we either personally think are interesting or cool, but things that we think our users might think are interesting or cool. And I think we have a pretty good balance at knowing not to waste too much time on that. We're not going to create 25 custom helicopter icons of different types, right? But one helicopter, that, I don't know how long it took one of our designers to draw that. Probably not that long,
And you can hook it up to Google Maps, Waze, and Apple Maps, I believe.
Yes.
And those all open in separate apps. There's no mapping company that would let you directly integrate, let me have my map with directions inside of your app. That doesn't really exist, does it?
I'm not sure about the other ones. I think it's been a while since I looked at Apple's Map Kit. For some reason, I think Map Kit does let you do it within the app, but maybe it may not have when we first wrote that feature.
It might have just been previewing of the location versus directions, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But then once if you wanted to do your own built-in kind of directions, it's just a lot more involved. And you're doing kind of advanced map kit stuff. And I think probably...
and most users would probably just give me in the map that I'm using for turn by turn.
But it is a reasonable thing, right? I mean, I understand people wanting to stay in the app. Yeah. Although maybe it's the opposite. I mean, maybe you want it to launch, say, Apple Maps, because now you can use that directly in CarPlay. The same, you can take it's already on your Apple Maps, and it now pops up in your CarPlay, and you can do things where you say like, oh, add a stop at Starbucks on my way to the place or whatever. So you by just letting the actual map apps handle it, you don't have to handle everything. So that's where we're at.
Earlier we spoke about split screen versus Stage Manager. I use split screen quite a bit, and it's one of the ways I interact with a lot of apps. When you put your app in split screen as kind of the 1/3 view, the little iPhone size class, is that pretty much what the iPhone experience is like with your apps? It should be.
I mean, we don't. I'm not saying that there might be some little bit of code somewhere that says, no matter what the size class, if it's iPad, do this one thing. But
design-wise, it's pretty similar.
Yeah. If there's anything in there that's doing something slightly different, I think that's legacy stuff that existed before Apple added split screen and size classes. But the intention is that that's just a big, tall, skinny iPhone, basically. Which sometimes works out great. I mean, just speaking as a developer and designer, sometimes it's hard to have, even with size classes, to support every possible size and shape. Like, you can have the 1/3 split view on the iPad in portrait mode. So it's this really tall,
you could be on like a 13-inch iPad, and it's the tallest iPhone ever made. Right? Yeah.
And sometimes no matter what you do, that's never going to look awesome. Like your design can't look, you can do your best, but I think it's kind of impossible to make it look awesome in every pathological case. So you have to just kind of do your best.
Yeah. What are you most proud of from design perspective when you are just using the full out iPad app, no split screen, you have the full real estate to work with?
I'll tell you something I'm proud of that I helped implement, and I think is a cool feature. So on the iPad app for TimePage, we now have this on the iPhone, but originally we didn't. If you keep scrolling to the left, you eventually get to the full screen calendar view, which was not originally part of the first version of TimePage, but we decided on the iPad we can do that. Before you get to the full screen calendar view, you're on another screen that on the left side, we have what's called the heat map, which is like a little mini grid, a little mini calendar. And as it transitions from the mini calendar to the full screen calendar, it actually does a full custom transition where all the numbers in all the calendar cells, like the day numbers, all kind of convert from the little mini form to the expanded form. And it does that there's a button you can tap that like switches between the modes. But again, if you are just swiping slowly, you can kind of see the transition and how everything kind of moves in, which I just think is really cool. And that's, I've had other developers ask me like, how do you guys do that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
And the answer is it's not a secret. We're not better programmers than anyone else. It is simply having the will to do it. You simply, it's work. You just decide, instead of it just doing a crossfade to the other screen, or just kind of the thing where it maybe pans from one screen to another, you just decide we are going to do this custom thing where every single element on one screen is going to move in a certain way to the next screen. And they all, if you play with it, all the elements move at different speeds and don't come in all at the same time. You'll start scrolling and some things will start coming in, and then maybe you're halfway scrolling and more things come in. And that's something I was really proud of implementing that. But I have to give a lot of credit to our designers again, who came up with the idea, and they're the ones that said, like, nope, everything can't come in at the same time. Everything has to kind of start animating at different points and different speeds. And it's like, okay, we can do that. But after doing all that work, you end up with the result. And most people might not even notice, but I notice, and it's cool.
Yeah, I noticed it the other day, and it is a beautiful thing. It kind of reminds me, Steve Jobs, he was introducing, I think, the genie effect, where you can hold down Shift on the minimize key and minimize the traffic light on the Mac, and it just slow motion minimizes with everything just there alive. You have videos playing; it'll be playing in the thing.
Yeah, because it's impressive, and you should be allowed to enjoy its impressiveness even at slow speeds. You can kind of actually see what's happening. So I mentioned that one because that's very specific to the iPad. I think you asked about iPad features. So
yeah, for sure. And then something on the full monthly calendar in TimePage, when you look at individual days that are really packed, I noticed you can't scroll to the bottom of that day, and instead tapping is kind of the solution to see the full day. Did you guys experiment with scrolling individual days? Did that get kind of problematic with accidental scrolls and stuff like that?
We did not. I don't think we even experimented with that. In general, there's some exceptions, but in general, nested scrolling that goes the same direction is always a bit of a trick, because
so how do you scroll a day without scrolling to the next month? Yeah.
Right. Or how do you, you could have a day with 100 events on it, and if you just happen to have your finger on that day when you simply want to scroll to the next month, you'd be scrolling quite a bit. So on the Mac version of TimePage, we also didn't, well, we improved upon that a couple ways. One, on the Mac, one of the nice things is you can do hover effects with the mouse, which you actually can do on iOS too, if you happen to have a mouse hooked up, but we haven't explored that yet. But on the Mac, so you can if you hover over a day that has more events than can fit in the cell, it'll do a little popover that shows you all the events for the whole day, temporarily. And then for the timeline on the Mac version, which again, for people don't know, the timeline is kind of just this vertically scrolling list of days. We did something different. We made the events stack horizontally, and so you can scroll horizontally within a cell if you have more events than fit in that. And that was something that works a little better. If nested scrolling two different directions, it kind of works out. But that still was a struggle. That was still something that we kind of went back and forth on. Did we want it to scroll, or do we want it to just do a hover effect? And I can't say you know what, we nailed it, but it was just something that we experimented with, and that's it. Doing things like that when you have a new platform and you have nothing to lose, try new things. It kind of does help you think about the other platforms. So I think we could revisit all these things on the iOS version, especially with the full screen month view, which probably hasn't got as much attention as far as like new features in a while.
Yeah. For the weather displayed in TimePage, have you considered adding secondary locations? So when you look at the day, here's, like, I work in a coastal town, so it's a fair bit cooler there from where I live. Have you kind of looked into like an option and preferences to let's have some different locations in there that you can name and have included there?
I can't remember if that's come up. We do have a feature request board, and it may have come up, but it has not been something that we've gotten a lot of feedback on. It certainly is a good idea, and it's pretty easy to do. We'd have to come up with a way of setting up what your locations are. Right now, the nice thing is we just use current location for everything, so no one has to ever pick a location. But
yeah, the other instance I could think of is if you're going on vacation soon and you have events in a completely different geography, like having some way of linking it to, like, if you do put a location in for that day, like having it kind of set to that maybe.
No, it does make sense, especially for things, because events like a vacation actually probably might even have a location attached to it.
Right.
Of course, it's not always the case that sometimes you care about the weather where you're at, not the weather where you're going. And so I could see something where maybe you can see all the different weathers that might be associated with different locations.
Weather's it's an interesting one because there's so many preferences and ways people would want to see that stuff. Yeah.
So Tim, is this the feature request portion of the podcast?
Just that one thing.
I'm just kidding.
I was just curious. Yeah.
You snuck that in there. That's good.
Yeah. Well, anything else about TimePage we haven't covered yet that is worth touching?
I can't think of anything in particular.
Okay. So actions, a couple of different things here. I love the idea of the logbook. Was this there before you got there? Or I love this idea of
was when I joined the team. It was before actions had been released. So the logbook's always been there, and
it's great because basically what this is when you finish a task, it's in your logbook. A lot of task managers, it just vanishes and it's like, what did I do today? It's like I did stuff. I don't
And it turns out what we've learned with actions is the way people think about planning tasks for everyone is so different. It's crazy. And there'll be people out there that will look at the logbook and go, why would you even do that? Who cares? Like, why would I? And they're even bothered by it. Like, I want to clear it constantly. But there's other people for whom, not just planning what you're doing in the future, but looking at what you've accomplished or making sure, like, when did I check that off? When was that done? That's like a super important part of their, the way they organize their lives. And so, I think it's cool to be there for it to be there.
Yeah. And then something I noticed is you can mark a task as on fire or frozen. Now, is frozen like pause in your mind where it's like kind of in status, and is like on fire like like it's like blowing up in a bad thing?
Those are just supposed to be priorities. I mean, I guess you can mentally. We don't tell you what it is, so if you want to think of it as urgent versus not urgent, that is one way of thinking about it. But if you want to think about it as if you work at some climate controlled lab and the actual climate is important to your tasks. But that's just an example of, you come up with what we think of as like priority, high, low, and medium, right? But then you think like, do we have to use those standard terms? And if you did call it that, what if you just wanted to represent it as an icon, what would you do? And so our designers just thought, well, let's just start with those. Like, maybe, I don't know how they did it. Maybe they started with what's the icon we should use and then figured out the meaning later. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just had this idea. I don't think I've ever seen this in any task manager, but I'd love to have some kind of smart thing to show me what I'm doing today. And one of those things is based on temperature, back to weather. And, if it's 60 to 80 degrees, have mow the lawn on my thing, and once it gets past that, it's too hot, I don't want to be outside for this task. Don't show it to me.
That's a good idea. That's interesting. Right? Because I could see you even doing that beyond just weather, right? Because right now the context for everything is usually what day you want it to be done, right? That's the due date.
Yeah, or it could be even like, show me the coolest weather day in the next 2 weeks and mow the lawn on that day.
For the planning part. Yeah. Huh, I like it.
Yeah, I don't know. That just came across my mind as we were talking about frozen and fire.
Yeah.
How do you personally take advantage of your own apps? Like, do these apps help you run your personal and work life? Is Flow something you do sketching in for fun, or what kind of?
Yeah, to some degree. I think I would say I use TimePage the most because I just simply use it as a straight replacement for Apple Calendar. I use it for all the things I would use it for, which I am someone that's, I don't over-organize my life, but I do, especially with calendar events. I like to keep track of all things coming up. For actions, I use it about as much as I used to use reminders, which is just for simple repeating tasks. A lot of times, like, remember which day is trash day. I got to take out that. Is it trash or is it trash and recycling? Those kind of things. And shopping lists, things like that. I tend not to kind of over-organize my life in terms of tasks, so I use it a little bit less. Flow, in some ways, I've used it the most because I was one of the two primary developers working on it every day for many, many months, and especially with all the little interactions. I like using it just for as kind of a little a little sketchpad / notepad that I just have next to me. When I just think of something I have to deal with, I just sketch it down. I used to use a little paper notebook for that. Like, oh, got an email from the plumber I'm trying to make an appointment with, got to remember to call them back. And it's not really something I want to plan as a task. I just want to write it down. And so I kind of have some flow documents that I just use for jotting down information like that, or sometimes just sketching a little thing. Sometimes when you're doing programming stuff, especially when you're doing UI things, you do have to think about something that has to do with the geometry of things, and you actually want to draw a little real crude sketch. Like it's like the napkin sketch is the classic example. So I do a lot of napkin sketching, but I'm not a drawing artist or anyone who's good at that kind of thing. So I kind of, don't do as much of that.
Yeah. So let's dive into Flow. One of the things that just struck out to me was it feels like you're using PencilKit, but it's very obvious you're not. So that, system-wide thing that's from Apple Notes where it's got your tools down there and all that. But instead, it's got this more custom system that feels familiar. What were some of the things you wanted to accomplish with this kind of implementation of this kind of toolkit?
Yeah. So Flow, the first version, was released spring of 2019. And PencilKit was announced at WWDC 2019 in June, a few months later. So it was not a question of should we use PencilKit or not at the time. It was just, we're going to do our own thing.
Yeah.
I know the designers of the app, they were very keen on having drawing tools that felt and looked very much like real physical pens as far as how the ink flows out, that kind of thing, which PencilKit does to a certain degree, but they spent a lot more time on it, and I think our drawing engine looks a little bit more realistic than PencilKit, which is PencilKit's perfectly adequate, but I think we've done a little better in that regard. And so they picked all the different types of drawing tools that they thought would be useful. I don't think we've added any new ones since then. But it's a custom drawing engine. I did not write the drawing engine. My colleague, whose also name is Adam, created it, and it's a fully written in metal from scratch for the drawing engine. I did most of the UI controls that are floating over the drawable canvas, but they spent a lot of time just tweaking the way all the tools, the way all the drawing tools looked and felt, and it was a whole thing that I watched from the sidelines, but I did not have that much active involvement in.
Yeah. So who is Flow for? Like, you mentioned sketching and different things. So what kind of different users are using this? We definitely have artists who are using it. One of the things about Flow that kind of makes it stand out a little bit from Notes or even from other sketching apps is it's really designed not to just have huge toolbars full of features, but really to try to get out of your way as much as possible. The reason it's called Flow is it's about achieving the state of flow in your creative whatever you're trying to create or do creatively. It's not fully blank canvas, everything goes away, but the idea is you can just easily switch between tools and draw things. And we have some artists that do beautiful, super detailed drawings. We have other people that are more doing kind of, I don't know, I guess you call them blueprinty type of drawings where they're just sketching not real architectural blueprints, but that kind of thing, sketching out something they want to build in their backyard or measuring something out. We have people that are more interested in kind of as a creative endeavor or a maybe even I can't think of the right term, but
kind of like the challenges people do, like do a sketch every day, you know, just to kind of like a meditative sort of, that was the word I was looking for, that kind of thing. We have students who use it for note taking and more like writing text, but also with some drawing in there. So I don't want to say, oh, it's for everyone, because that's usually the kiss of death when it comes to design, because you can't have any app that's truly for everyone. But it was designed not to have any real particular focus and to kind of be approachable, kind of no matter who you were.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I love that you can add your own modifications to all the different writing instruments in there. One thing, feature request time. I'd love the fountain pen if you could say swap out the nib to like italic nib or a music nib and have like custom nibs you could throw in there that would behave differently as you're writing and sketching. That would be a lot of fun, I think.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. It didn't even occur to me that that the fountain pen has different types of nibs, of course, for different things.
There's even a crazy, I have this, it's for dipping in a bottle of ink, but you can dip this thing. It's got 5 tongs off this nib for music staves. So you can write your own music staves by dipping it in ink and which is a lot of fun.
That's cool. Do you do music composition?
Yeah, I was a composition major. So when my entrance, whatever my submission to get into college, I did this crazy abstract thing where I used this nib and I had a circular staff and I had used color and pressure of the staff to indicate some weird stuff. That's a lot of fun. A lot of fun stuff. Yeah.
I was curious. We have, Flow does have, you can choose a background pattern for like things for like, basically grids or lines or things, but a blank music sheet is one of the popular ones that people bring up as, like, oh, can't I just, and people currently get around it by, you can import, images or PDFs. So people do that, but that would be an obvious one if we just wanted to kind of expand our and then we probably would have to do something with the fountain pen tool. Yeah. All the tools there's things you can change, but it's all the same thing. We don't yet have any things that are custom to particular tool type, but that's definitely a cool idea.
And then one of the most delightful things I discovered was PencilCase, where you can have your iPhone sitting next to you, having Flow open.
I love that you found this, because it's not the most obvious feature unless you look for it. Go ahead and describe it.
Yeah. So I discovered it. I was just scrolling through Flow, and the very last page, it says something about this PencilCase in the iPhone. It's like, oh, let me try this. And yeah, so you open up Flow next to your iPad, and instantly, I didn't have to touch anything. All the tools just went to my iPhone, full screen. And it really was like a magical thing. I didn't have to touch anything. And the cool thing is, so you have more interface on your iPad to actually draw. And it's kind of, if you're using multiple writing instruments, it's very intuitive to be like drawing and interacting with your other hand on your iPhone to just kind of swap instruments. And where did this idea come from? I love it.
I don't remember. Gosh, it probably came from just some, as you're developing an app before it's even released, you're always throwing around different ideas. And some of them are we should do that for version 1 pile. And then some of them are, we should do that for version 1.1 or version 1.2. And then some are just actually these kind of ideas that are just so kind of crazy that you're like, I don't even like, that's a really cool idea, but we're not sure when or if we would ever do it. And I think the PencilCase was always in that kind of crazy bin. Like, we seriously thought it would be a cool thing to do, but it was never something where you'd say, well, clearly that should be prioritized above bug fixes or other features. And so we, in early 2020, right before the pandemic hit, our team did we had a retreat. We're a remote team. We all live very far away from each other, but we did a retreat where we all were in Europe together. And a lot of that is, brainstorming new ideas, but this idea of PencilCase came out. And then it was called PencilCase from the beginning. That was always what we referred to as, like, PencilCase was both the code name and the actual feature name. And I think it came up again. One of our designers, Ben, kind of mentioned it again. And, we're at this retreat where we're in retreat mode. So like nothing is like super important work. We're just, a lot of it is just playing around with ideas. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to spend today. I'm going to get something. I'm going to get a proof of concept of PencilCase. I'm going to get something where I have a UI on the phone and it's going to connect via multi-peer connectivity. That's one of the frameworks that Apple provides. And you're going to be able to change everything on the phone and it will change it on the iPad. And I came up with something definitely, I don't remember how far I got, but definitely by the end of the day, it worked. You could play around with it. And then, of course, it was ugly, because I just hacked stuff together. And once it worked and people played with it and people thought, wow, this is not just a cool idea, but actually does feel good to use. This is something that's really compelling. It's something that is could be a cool marketing advantage, competitive advantage. Then we said, okay, we're going to do this. And that's when our designers got to work really designing exactly how it should work and how it should look. And so I don't remember, it was after the retreat. I spent maybe another week or so on it. And and we think it works great. And it requires no setup. I think you have to be signed into your Moleskine Digital Studio account, the same account on both devices. But when you're logged into both and you just happen to have Flow open on both devices, it will just I think there's a mode where it automatically connects, but at very least it shows the little icon that lets you tap to connect.
Yeah, and you can toggle that on and off at will.
Yeah. And that was one of the ideas, was that, we don't want people to have to, type PIN codes on one device or do all these weird connections. It was like, can we just make this awesome? Interestingly enough, I'll share one more little story. We did not implement this, but the other thing was pitched was, okay, could you have a pencil case on your Apple Watch of some sort? Now, this is more... You could probably even guess that this is something that's not very useful at all, even truly not useful, but would be very cool. But I did also prototype something that kind of worked, where you could change the colors on the watch, but that never got implemented because it turned out that was just not. You're holding the Apple Pencil in one hand with Flow, and your other hand has.
The Apple Pencil, the watch is a two-handed device.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And also it was slow because the watch doesn't sync with the iPad. So the watch is actually syncing with the phone, which is synced with the iPad, and it just had so much latency. And the watch apps in general are slow or whatever. But that was I don't think we'll ever actually implement that. But that was another one of those. We put it in the crazy bucket that it just kind of stayed there. We realized this is not.
Yeah. Does this work if you're like in the middle of the woods with no Wi-Fi? Can it be local, just Wi-Fi is on the device but not connected to anything? Would it still work in that way?
Yes. It doesn't require them to be connected to an actual Wi-Fi base station. It does use peer-to-peer Wi-Fi to actually do it. I forget, multi-peer, I think it can use Bluetooth to kind of start the initial connection, but then it does try to go to... Maybe it also works over Bluetooth. I don't know. But yes, you do not have to be connected. So if you're at a hotel and you don't want to connect to the hotel Wi-Fi, but... both devices still have Wi-Fi on, it'll work.
And then Apple Pencil Hover. It works exactly as you expect, where you have a preview of what you're about to draw. How soon should we expect Apple Pencil Pro support with like barrel roll and any other ways the gyroscope can be utilized and the squeeze? And I know Apple's implemented this crazy shadowing system, which I'm not sure if you guys will try to do your own version of that as well.
Yeah. We are absolutely working on it. It actually is very, 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 very soon that you should expect a lot of those things. I'm working on other apps now, so I'm not I don't have my fingers closely on the pulse of Flow and the exact release schedule, but I know we have internal builds that have these features, and we're just figuring out the exact timing. Except we don't have the shadow, but the roll does something. It changes the angle of the stroke, and the squeeze does have some. I think it is like a radial menu. I can't remember exactly if we finalized the design of that, but it's similar to how the pencil kit, standard pencil kit stuff works. So I'd say very, very soon. No promises, but not months. Like Probably not even weeks. Probably sooner than that. So.
Okay, very cool. And then I also love how there are tons of options for how the pencil should interact if you're also using your finger at the same time. And there's all these like double tap and triple finger tap options in there. Well, what's kind of the thought process in building out kind of, using flow in a natural way where you can flow and use your fingers and pencil all together?
Yeah. So Flow was absolutely designed with the idea it was intended that you'd be using it on the iPad with Apple Pencil as the primary use. You can draw with your finger if you want, and you can actually use it on the iPhone, a little tiny canvas with your finger. There's obviously lots of compromises there. But because we expected a lot of people were going to be using it with Apple Pencil, it kind of, I don't know, that's one set of, that's one device that's you can use exclusively for drawing, right? You can also use it to tap on UI, but it also lets, you have another hand and it has fingers, and you can still now do, gestures that are only for the finger, right? So a very common example is, say, if you're only using finger and you want to draw with your finger, well, then how do you scroll? Well, you scroll with two fingers, right? That's very common. But if you're using Apple Pencil, you can set up Flow so that the scroll is just one finger, which is really nice. And a lot of the other gestures, like you can set up things for like, 2-finger tap, maybe I think 3-finger tap.
Yeah.
And you can set it to things like undo or redo. Things like that were just, what are the common quick things people might want to do? One of the really cool things, though, is that you can set it up to really be useful. Talking about using the Apple Pencil and your finger at the same time, there's a mode where you can say, if I'm holding my finger on the screen, it changes what the Apple Pencil actually does. So the Apple Pencil is still where you're drawing and where you're erasing and that kind of stuff. But now if I hold my finger on the screen, it changes from draw to erase mode or whatever, which you can also do with the Apple Pencil, the little tap that you can do on the pencil itself. But the idea is that you can, and people find that really useful, because especially if you're in a certain mode where you want to switch between two tools a lot, and sometimes, even what is it? I guess I'd call it the second generation Apple Pencil. That's the one where you could only do kind of the tap, the
double tap.
The double tap, it works most of the time, but it's not super reliable. So if you can imagine being a lot faster just by holding your finger down and erase real quick and then let up to actually draw. We just came up with kind of like all permutations of things gesture types you could do with your finger and with the Apple Pencil, and let you configure it however you want to combine them in any way.
Yeah. No, very cool. And it's very well thought out in that way. And then along the same lines of me discovering the PencilCase, I discovered the Moleskine Pen Plus is a thing. I had a LiveScribe pen ballpoint back in high school. This was the early 2000s. It used special paper and a little IR camera, I think, on the paper to like read what I was doing. So tell me about the Moleskine Pen Plus. Does it need special paper like that thing did? Like, what is this thing?
Yeah. So first I'll mention Moleskine Pen Plus is not part of the Moleskine Studio suite that we've been talking about so far, and is developed not by my team, but by a different team at Moleskine.
And then you guys collaborate so it can import and work with your apps.
Right. We have added in Flow specifically, you can import from the Smart Pen into Flow, but it's a very lightweight integration. Okay. But the way it works is exactly as you described. It is you have to buy a version of the Moleskine notebooks, and that's what they mainly sell. That is called the Smart Notebook. And if you look very closely at this notebook under a magnifying glass, you'll see there's a very light dot pattern across the entire page. And the pen itself has a little optical sensor right by where you're drawing on it. So you are, for people that don't know, you are effectively taking a real pen with real ink and writing on a real notebook with real paper, just like you normally would. But while you're doing this, it is tracking every stroke you're making on the paper, like as far as like digital data, and storing it in the pen, which then you can sync to your devices, and then have a digital version of the exact same data that you wrote on the notebook. So it's kind of bridges those two worlds of, if you want to keep your life digitally, but you also just love feeling a pad of paper in your hands and using a nice pen. And so that is how that works. But there is there's another app called, is it called Notes or Notes Plus? I can't remember. Another Moleskine app, which again, we don't develop, which is the primary app intended to be used for the Smart Pen. But in Flow, we've, as I mentioned, added the feature to allow you to import stuff from the Smart Pen into Flow. It's not a real strong integration, but it's just kind of it's there if you need it.
Yeah, that's very cool. It'd be amazing if you guys developed a TimePage physical version, so you could like be writing in TimePage and then import that into the app. But that sounds like that might be a bit complicated to make that all work.
Yeah. Well, anything's possible. We have brainstormed different ideas like that, but there's always a list of things and.
Yes.
A list of things to do. Yeah. Another retreat. Exactly. Yeah. We haven't been on a retreat since that one because of
yes.
World events.
Yes. As far as collaboration, what is that experience like? Like, is it real time? You can be like flowing together and you're not stepping on each other in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can, it's a couple different ways to set it up, but like basically you have a Flow document and you can share it with someone else that has Flow. And when you do that, you both can see the document and you see all the updates in real time. If I make a little blue mark on mine within hopefully less than like half a second, you'll see the blue mark on the other one. It's trying to be as real time as possible. It also does integrate with SharePlay. So if you kind of set up a SharePlay session where you're FaceTiming someone, that can also start you can connect a SharePlay session to the actual sharing of the document. And we've done we have weekly meetings at my company. We're a remote team, and we've done meetings where we are taking notes. Sometimes we use things like Google Docs or something like that, but we've also done full meetings where we just use Flow and everyone is drawing at the same time. It also has what's it called? A presence feature, not presents like what you open at Christmas, but presents like you are present, where when someone is drawing, it puts a little indicator next to the thing that they drew. So like, oh, Adam drew this thing. And in fact, even if they drew off a part of the canvas that you no longer have visible, because one thing we didn't mention, Flow has an infinite canvas either horizontally or vertically. You can just keep scrolling to the right or up and down and just get more and more canvas.
Yeah, you're in a collaborative and then you zoom out a million %. It's like, who was up there?
Yeah. So if someone is doing some work, drawing some things way off screen, it'll show that little badge kind of at the edge of the screen showing with a little arrow, and you can tap on it and it will scroll you right to where they are. So it's showing you, in addition to just sharing, it's also showing you who is actively editing that document at that exact moment. Because you might have shared it with 20 people, but there's only 5 people in your meeting who are actively working on it, and so they'll kind of show up. You can see who's right there editing it with you.
Yeah. And then you also take advantage of screen recording and broadcasting. Is that something users were requesting, or is that something you guys, you were already doing the collaboration that's like, let's do this as well?
Yeah, I think we did get some user requests. Users mostly want to just export as like a static, image. But some people that are artists, they do like live streaming.
Yeah, and there's the time lapse feature as well.
Yeah,
cool.
That a lot of artists like to do. Honestly, one of the other reasons we added it is it is a great marketing tool, right? If people are now sharing, hey, don't just look at what I drew, but look at how I did it. That sells the app. That's a great thing. Other competing apps do the same thing, and we kind of saw how that was working, and we thought, we should do that too. But it also is something that some users definitely wanted.
And then Flow also supports layers, something that you won't find in Apple Notes ever, I don't think.
Yeah.
In what ways have these been useful?
Yeah, layers the first version did not launch with layers. Layers was something we added maybe just a year or two ago. And there was much discussion internally about whether or not we really wanted to do layers or not. It does add a layer of complexity. See what I did there?
Yes.
Sorry. But we took it as a challenge. Our designers thought, okay, does it have to be overly complex? Does it have to be overly fiddly? Can we do what would layers look like in Flow? And so I think we came up with a pretty good solution. I mean, it fundamentally works like, a lot of layer systems. There's a little layer palette that you can add a new layer and you can turn them on or off. But one of the things that this really helps with is, a lot of times you're sketching something, like an artist might do something, a pencil sketch, a rough sketch, and then they really do like the inked version on top of that. And what layers let you do is kind of like create another layer for the inked version, but you're not losing, you're not really like drawing over your pencil sketch. Before layers, and we still have this feature, you can do things like our select tool and our eraser lets you choose which tool types they affect.
Oh, that's really cool.
So, and we did that before we had layers because we thought, okay, what if you just want to erase the pencil underneath your inked version? You could just set the eraser to just erase pencil, but not ink, and you could do that. And so now with layers, it's just kind of another way of doing that. It makes things a little more non-destructive, right? You want to add something new, you can make it as a layer, and if you just totally hate what you've done, you can easily just delete that layer or throw it away. And we do support undo and things, so it's not like every stroke you make you can't undo, but layer is kind of like letting you work, I don't know, in a more sort of modular way, I guess.
Yeah. So this one, I think I know the answer, but I'm curious about. Have you considered adding a way to add shapes or text boxes? This is all about drawing, and there's no way to type in this app. And with shapes, there's like one thing, if you don't want to do like a shape selector, like doing the thing where you draw a rough circle and hold it down and it snaps into a perfect circle. That's another way to go about this solution, I guess. What were you guys' feelings on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely thought about it. We've brainstormed ideas. I think it hasn't quite got to the point where we know exactly what that would look like. With the exception of images that you can add, Flow, everything you draw looks like something that you've drawn with a real pen. Things like text now are sort of another thing that isn't drawing, which is fine. Like you can think of, I can imagine a text box just being like an image in the sense of it's something you plop down in there, you can move it around, you can edit it. So it makes sense. And as far as shapes go, that's one of the things you mentioned is related to the answer, is figuring out like, do you want it to be like I want to create a star now, or do you want it to be, I want to draw something that looks like a star, and then the thing offers like, hey, I can turn this into a real star, and which would be better for the app. And it's so the answer to your question is basically absolutely, we've thought about that kind of stuff a lot, and I would not be surprised if it wasn't something that we added fairly soon, but it just hasn't percolated to the top of the both the priority list, but also to the point where we feel like we know exactly what that would look like in terms of how you actually do that in the app, what we add for the UI to kind of make that happen.
Yeah, because the UI it helps you flow. It's very straightforward. It helps you not get in the way, and to do any of these things, you have to approach it the right way, which can take time. Yeah. Anything else about Flow we didn't cover that you'd like to?
Well, a bit of shameless self-promotion. I'll just mention for people who are interested. Flow was released in 2019 and won an Apple Design Award that same year, and also won Apple's iPad App of the Year. So I'm just showing off a little bit, but pointing out it's app's no slouch. I'm very, very proud of that and what the team did there. But as far as other features and things, I think we covered kind of all the things that would be interesting.
Very cool. And then as far as just general, I'm curious, like the design of these apps is very strong. Is the iPad kind of the starting place, and then it scopes down to the iPhone from there and kind of morphs into what the Mac version is like, or is there a different starting place for where all these apps design-wise come from?
It's different for each app. For TimePage and Actions, they started designed as iPad apps. In fact, the first versions were iPad only. Originally, we had a separate iPad. Remember back when everyone was doing separate iPad
yes,
apps?
HD.
Yes. So that was TimePage was one of those, but then we eventually made it universal. And they were designed as iPhone apps, and then you kind of have to adapt that design to the iPad. For TimePage, that adaptation came after the app was already launched, like a year or more after. For Actions, we launched with both iPhone and iPad at the same time. But, you can't help but kind of design with one thing in mind, even if you're adapting along the way. And a lot of times the way these things work, I think it's pretty common with iOS developers. I think starting with iPhone tends to be the way people think, and then you adapt it to the iPad. And typically the way you adapt it is you take what are different separate screens on the iPhone and you say, I will put these 2 or 3 screens together now on one screen.
Yeah.
And that's actually kind of what Apple does too. Whether you use the sidebar or the split controllers or things like that, it's pretty common. There's pros and cons, that the downside is a lot of times you end up with a more compromised iPad design. You do what kind of looks good enough. Also, sometimes it's just hard to adapt that way. I think about apps like we mentioned Reminders. Reminders on the iPad is fine, but you look at it and you look at like the right side where it has the list of actual tasks, and it's so much white space, right? Like no one's gonna have task titles that are, I don't know, whatever, 8 inches of iPad space long.
Yeah, an Amazon title product listing.
Well, yeah. So, and so in some cases, when I say it's like a compromise, there's maybe nothing you can do. Like I can't say like, well, unlike the Mac where you can make the window whatever size you want, right? You make it just big enough. For Flow, we did the exact opposite. Flow was designed for the iPad specifically. In fact, originally we planned on launching with just iPad only, and we were definitely going to do iPhone still, but we just thought, let's not worry about that for now. But it turned out halfway through development, a lot of people on the team really wanted to use Flow in split screen multitasking modes.
Which you need iPhone to do.
And once you're doing that, you're using the small size classes.
Yep.
And we thought, well, if this now has to be done for launch, then essentially it's just going to be an iPhone version too. And so we made that change. I don't know if it added that much time. There was the opposite struggle. Flow was designed not at all thinking, how will we fit all this stuff on a smaller screen? It was kind of like, that'll be future teams' problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But we, for example, we have a toolbar at the top of Flow, and it has like 6 or 8 things, and that many things will not fit on a toolbar on a phone. So you have to kind of figure out, okay, what are the most important things for that toolbar, and what should we do? And you kind of, I won't call it cheating, but it always feels a little bad when you think, well, we'll put 5 of the items behind a special toolbar item that just is a little, a little menu that just, takes all of these other items, a little sub menu of a menu kind of thing. Although for, Flow, the iPad version, by default, you have your tool dock where all your tools are is on one side of the screen, and your pen editor that lets you change colors is on the other side. You can swap sides But that doesn't make sense on the iPhone in portrait mode. And so iPhone portrait mode, now the tool dock has to be at the bottom and the other thing has to be at the top. But it also means things aren't just moved, but they're actually rotated, right? They're scrolling the exact opposite direction. And of course we had designed this very hard coded, like the pen dock scrolls vertically so how do you, deal with stuff? And we actually ended up doing a lot of tricks. Actually, a lot of times we did it just by applying a geometric transform on the whole thing. Like we just say, rotate the whole thing by 90 degrees. And then the app still thinks it's scrolling vertically, but it's actually scrolling horizontally. So it was interesting. And I don't know. If you asked which is better, to start with the iPad or the iPhone, I don't know what I would say. I'd probably still say start with the iPhone. I'd say unless your app really is intended for iPad as its primary use, start with iPhone. It's a bigger market.
It is, yeah.
We had the problem where, not a big problem, but we launched on both iPad and iPhone. And, it's not that we don't intend people to use the iPhone version to do anything, but it's probably better as like a read-only mode sort of version of your thing.
Yeah, that's what I kind of see Flow as. It's like on the iPhone, it's just like, let me look at what I did on my iPad.
Yeah. And you can or jot down a little thing, but it's not intended really for, I'm going to create my work of art masterpiece.
Right.
2019, we got a lot of attention through winning a Apple Design Award, got lots and lots and lots of downloads, but where's everyone? You go to the App Store and we're featured, but everyone's on the iPhone when they see that. So we had this problem where like 90% of all our first time downloads were on the iPhone, and that's not the experience that you want. And people, no one was mean about it saying this is like bad, because it's not bad, but I think it didn't translate as much to people.
Yeah, because Apple Pencil is such a critical thing for this, even let alone the screen space. Yeah.
And we didn't do this. We thought, like, should we put something in the app when you launch it on the app on iPhone saying, hey, welcome to Flow. It's really like great on your iPad. Make sure you download it on your iPad. We didn't actually do that, but we thought about it. It's just one of those things. But that's more about the App Store and how iPhone and iPad are the same item in the store and universal apps. And
it gets weird with that. Yeah. So lastly, Apple Vision Pro. It's a very small, tiny platform. Does it need to be a much bigger platform for these apps to make their way over their TimePage and Actions?
I would say yes. When the Vision Pro was first announced, we were all very excited about it. I'm the only iOS developer living in the United States, so I was the only one that was possibly going to get one on day one. And I think we were excited about it. There is a lot to be said. Other developers will say the same thing, of just supporting Apple's newest devices. It's a way Apple loves it. Apple will support you, maybe feature you in the App Store, and that just gets your app in front of more eyeballs.
Yeah, there's at least a couple apps that have iPhone and iPad apps that I bought because of the Vision Pro.
Yeah,
because they were there.
So there is reason to build an app for a platform beyond just the user base of that one platform, especially when your app's also on other platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So we were excited about it, and we thought we should do something. We talked about specifically TimePage or Actions, doing kind of a real native Vision Pro version, and then. We just decided to hold off. We were excited about it. We decided to hold off. We did decide to flip the switch for TimePage and Actions to make the iPad versions available on Vision Pro. Even before testing it, we said, let's go for it. We can. I did some research and figured out like what problems we'd likely have. Because I was able to, anyone was. You could still build your iPad version for the simulator in Vision Pro even before the Vision Pro came out.
Yeah.
It seemed like everything was going to be fine, so we took a chance. Flow was another matter because of just the drawing engine.
Yeah, that'd be a weird thing.
we knew that we'd have to adapt it a lot more, even though I think in some ways we were excited about a Flow version because we thought, like, what about you have a canvas that wraps around you?
Yeah, totally.
That kind of thing. So
and Freeform does it where you're just looking and dragging stuff around.
And we were not able to play with Freeform before the Vision Pro came out. So now we can actually see more what that's like. And then I'm the only person on the team that has a Vision Pro now. And, we've tested it, TimePage and Actions. The iPad version works great. Of course, the iPad compatible versions are always a compromise, but, it works. And then I think our team enthusiasm for maybe like, let's build a native Vision Pro version just because we can, that waned a little bit. And then it became more pragmatic, like, okay, what will this actually get us? Will this, do we have users that, care about this? And I'll say this, it's a small number of people that have downloaded either of the apps on the Vision Pro, even the iPad version. And we have gotten, I think, I don't want to say zero or rounded to zero user requests, inquiries about it.
Yeah.
And so I think if we had gotten a whole lot of people asking for it, maybe that would have lit a fire to experiment or at least prototype something. But it's kind of like, well, if people aren't ready for it, maybe we'll hold off. Never say never, but right now.
No, it's a new platform and it's an expensive platform. Like when the iPad launched as a new platform, it was $500 getting the door. And so it's a different kind of thing with a much smaller market to address,
Yeah, absolutely.
So anything else before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think, this has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's been fascinating learning more about these apps. Where can people learn more about the Moleskine apps and follow you online?
The best place to go is for the apps is the website moleskinestudio.com. And I think we also have a Twitter account, but I don't remember it. For me personally, I do most of my social media work on Mastodon. You can find me at KabukiVision at mastodon.social.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. This has been great.
Well, that's my discussion with Adam. My thanks to Adam for his time recording. My thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.